What if one battle, one decision, one bullet, had gone the other way? American history is full of crossroads where fate teetered on a knife's edge. Today, we journey through 10 jaw-dropping what-if scenarios that could have completely rewritten the United States as we know it. These aren't just hypotheticals, they're the roads not taken, and the America that might have been. 1. What if Lee won at Gettysburg? Imagine a hot July in 1863. The fields of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, are soaked in blood and smoke. For 3 days, North and South clash in one of the fiercest battles of the Civil War. But what if it ended differently? What if General Robert E. Lee had broken through Union lines and won at Gettysburg? A Confederate victory at Gettysburg would have turned the tide of the war. Morale in the North, already wavering, might have collapsed. Anti-war Democrats, known as Copperheads, could have gained traction, pushing President Lincoln toward peace talks. The Confederacy might have been recognized as a separate nation by Britain or France. And just like that, the United States would be split in two. Washington, D.C., barely 80 miles from Gettysburg, would have been ripe for Confederate attack. Panic would spread. The Union Army, demoralized and scattered, might not have been able to regroup in time. Lincoln's government could have been forced into exile or surrender. The Emancipation Proclamation, which had taken effect just months before, would lose its teeth. Slavery might not only survive in the South, it might spread westward. The Confederate States of America, now victorious, would face their own struggles. Internal divisions, economic instability, and diplomatic challenges would test their new independence. But with victory at Gettysburg, they'd be bargaining from a position of strength. Slavery would remain legal and protected. The dream of a unified, free America would be shattered. And in the North, the United States, now just a northern republic, would struggle to rebuild. Its economy would recover, but its soul would be bruised. The idea of American exceptionalism, the belief in one nation, indivisible, would die at Gettysburg. The world would watch two American nations grow in rivalry. Future wars between the North and South would be almost inevitable. And civil rights? Without a Union victory and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, progress would be delayed by decades, maybe centuries. The Battle of Gettysburg was more than just a fight. It was the turning point of the Civil War. A Confederate victory there could have changed not just American history, but the very idea of freedom around the world. 2. What if Lewis and Clark vanished? In 1804, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark set off on an epic journey to explore the uncharted American West. They crossed rivers, mountains, and tribal lands, mapping a path to the Pacific. But what if they vanished, killed by hostile tribes or lost in the Rockies? Without their journals, maps, and diplomacy, the West would remain a vast, terrifying mystery. President Jefferson's vision of continental expansion, the so-called Manifest Destiny, would stall. Settlers, fearing the unknown, would hesitate to move west. The Louisiana Purchase would feel more like a liability than an opportunity. Britain, still lurking in Canada, might seize the chance to expand southward. Spain could tighten its grip on California and the Southwest. The American West would become a battleground for European powers once again. The dream of coast-to-coast America would fade. Worse, U.S. relations with Native American tribes would take a darker turn. Lewis and Clark, while not perfect, tried diplomacy. Without their precedent, future explorers might rely solely on force. The brutal Indian Wars could begin decades earlier, and be even bloodier. Economic expansion, too, would suffer. The gold rush, the railroad, the Oregon Trail, all of these relied on the path Lewis and Clark charted. Without it, development would crawl. The U.S. might never become a continental power. And what of the spirit of exploration? Lewis and Clark's journey inspired generations. Their disappearance would haunt the nation, dampening scientific curiosity and national pride. The core of discovery was more than an expedition. It was a declaration of ambition. Had it failed, the United States might have remained an Atlantic nation, smaller, weaker, and forever looking west with fear instead of hope. 3. What if the Allies lost World War II? The year is 1944. The beaches of Normandy are quiet. There's no D-Day invasion. The Nazi war machine still rolls through Europe. What if the Allies lost World War II? Hitler's thousand-year Reich becomes reality. Britain, isolated and bombarded, may be forced into a peace deal. The Soviet Union, bleeding from the Battle of Stalingrad, collapses under renewed German offensives. America, far across the Atlantic, faces an empowered Axis with global reach. The Holocaust continues. Millions more die. Resistance movements are crushed. Fascism becomes the dominant political force across Europe. Japan, meanwhile, cements its empire across Asia and the Pacific. The U.S. either retreats into isolation, or faces a future war even deadlier than before. Without Allied victory, modern democracy falters. The United Nations never forms. NATO is never conceived. Human rights, international law, and global cooperation remain dreams deferred. The atomic bomb, developed in secret by the U.S., might fall into Axis hands instead. Science, culture, and technology take a different path. German supremacy becomes the cultural norm. American innovation, rooted in immigration, diversity, and freedom, stalls. The world plunges into an era of authoritarian rule. A Nazi victory in World War II would not just rewrite borders, it would remake the human story. One where fear, not freedom, defines the 20th century. 4. What if the Constitution had failed? It's 1787 in Philadelphia. The Constitutional Convention is in chaos. Disputes over state power, slavery, and representation threaten to tear the room apart. What if the delegates gave up, and the Constitution was never ratified? The fragile United States, still reeling from the Revolution, remains governed by the Articles of Confederation. There's no strong federal government. No president. No Supreme Court. Each state acts like its own country, printing money, imposing tariffs, and ignoring Congress. Economic collapse follows. Trade wars erupt between states. Foreign powers, sensing weakness, pounce. Britain refuses to leave its forts in the Northwest. Spain blocks the Mississippi. The dream of independence frays. Rebellion brews. In Massachusetts, Shays' rebellion isn't crushed, it spreads. Farmers and veterans rise up against taxes and debt. The federal government, powerless to act, watches as anarchy unfolds. Some states consider secession. Others flirt with monarchy. Without a constitution, the United States may dissolve entirely. The idea of a unified republic, of we the people, dies in its cradle. Global democracy, still in its infancy, loses its guiding light. The American experiment is written off as a noble failure. France's revolution spirals further into bloodshed. Monarchs across Europe tighten their grip. Without the Constitution, there is no Bill of Rights. No First Amendment. No checks and balances. Civil liberties as we know them are never guaranteed. The 19th and 20th centuries unfold under a very different banner, one where freedom is fragile and fleeting. 5. What if Washington had been caught? Imagine a frigid December night in 1776. General George Washington, exhausted and burdened by weeks of defeat, leads a desperate and daring mission across the icy Delaware River. His goal? A surprise attack on the Hessian forces in Trenton, a last-ditch effort to reignite hope in the failing American Revolution. But now imagine the unimaginable. Washington is captured during the raid. This single event, his capture, would have sent shockwaves through the colonies. The leader, the symbol, the soul of the rebellion, now in British chains. His troops, already starving and demoralized, would crumble. Morale would nosedive. Many Continental soldiers might desert, believing the cause to be lost. The daring raid at Trenton, which in our history revived revolutionary fervor, would be a footnote, an embarrassing failure. The immediate impact would be catastrophic. Washington was not just a general, he was the glue holding the revolution together. His charisma, strategic thinking, and refusal to quit gave the fledgling army its backbone. Without him, command would likely pass to General Charles Lee or Horatio Gates, both ambitious but divisive figures. Their political infighting and questionable military decisions could derail coordination between militias and the Continental Army. With Washington imprisoned or hanged as a traitor, both real possibilities, the revolution might collapse within months. Britain would seize on the psychological blow, pushing hard through New Jersey and New York. Loyalist support in the South and parts of the Middle Colonies would surge. Neutral colonists, seeing defeat as imminent, would rush to switch sides. The rebellion, seen increasingly as futile, would wither. But let's say the revolution limps on. The Second Continental Congress, panicked by Washington's capture, scrambles to appoint new leadership and rally allies. France and Spain, considering whether to support the Americans, now view them as unreliable. Washington's mythic status in Europe, key to gaining foreign aid, never takes root. Without him, Benjamin Franklin's mission to Paris stalls. France delays its support or pulls out altogether. No French navy at Yorktown. No French funding. No turning point. The war drags on, but it's a war the colonies cannot afford. Economic collapse sets in. Inflation from the continental dollar renders it worthless. Supplies dwindle. States begin ignoring Congress's calls for troops and taxes. The British capitalize, securing port cities and reinforcing their hold on Canada and the Caribbean. They promise gradual reform, greater representation in Parliament, and leniency for rebels who surrender now. One by one, colonies begin to fold. Georgia and South Carolina, heavily reliant on trade with Britain, accept Crown terms. New York and Pennsylvania see pro-British sentiment grow. Only New England holds out, driven by Puritan stubbornness and anti-British sentiment. But they, too, face blockades and starvation. Within 5 to 10 years, the revolution sputters to an undignified end. Britain re-establishes control, this time with stricter oversight and permanent military presence. And then what? The future of North America would look drastically different. There would be no United States. Instead, British North America would encompass everything from the Atlantic to the Mississippi River. Canada and the 13 colonies might be reorganized into a series of crown-controlled provinces. British governors would oversee local affairs. There would be no president, no Congress, and no constitution. The ripple effects would stretch far and wide. There would be no manifest destiny. Westward expansion, if it occurred at all, would be tightly regulated by the Crown. Native American tribes might see slightly more protection from settlers under British law, but their fate would still be grim. The Louisiana Territory would likely remain under French or Spanish control for much longer. The U.S. Purchase of 1803? Non-existent. There would be no War of 1812, no Civil War, and no Emancipation Proclamation. Slavery might persist even longer, as Britain's gradual abolition process moves more slowly across its empire. American industrial growth, stymied by British trade policies, would lag behind Europe. The U.S. never becomes a global superpower because it never exists. Culturally, a British-controlled America would remain deeply tied to European art, class structures, and traditions. The American spirit of frontier independence, entrepreneurialism, and democratic experimentation would be crushed early. Figures like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton would be remembered as failed radicals, not founders. Globally, the impact would be profound. The French Revolution might not happen. The U.S. Revolution inspired the French masses to rise up. Without that spark, Louis XVI may survive longer. Monarchies across Europe would face less pressure to reform. Republicanism might be delayed by decades. Democratic ideals would emerge more slowly. Later revolutions, Latin American independence movements, anti-colonial struggles in Asia and Africa, would lose a key ideological model. American democracy, with its checks and balances and civil liberties, wouldn't be there to inspire or instruct. The 20th century rise of liberal democracy would be severely weakened. Autocracies might dominate. Even World War I and II could unfold differently. Without the United States, Britain faces Germany and the Central Powers alone. American troops never arrive in Europe in 1917. The war drags on longer. In World War II, no Lend-Lease program, no D-Day invasion. Hitler's march across Europe might succeed. The atomic bomb? Never developed in an American lab. Modern life would be unrecognizable. No Silicon Valley, no moon landing, no Hollywood, no civil rights movement led by Martin Luther King Jr. All of these are rooted in the uniquely American trajectory that grew from the Revolution, and from Washington's leadership. Could someone else have filled Washington's shoes? Possibly, but unlikely. His rare combination of humility, strength, vision, and moral authority set him apart. He refused kingship, established peaceful transitions of power, and laid the blueprint for a republic. His capture wouldn't just remove a general, it would decapitate a revolution. This what-if is a chilling reminder of how much history hinges on a single person and a single moment. George Washington's capture could have rewritten the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. His survival and success didn't just birth a nation, they changed the world.